All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
So yeah,
My agent would have punched me in the face.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird.
I don't really care what happens with this movie. I really hope her career is pretty much over. I'd be thrilled to see that.
Disney decided to hire the most insufferable girl boss narcissist that exists on Earth, who hates Snow White.
What a shocker. Disney's endless fountain of live-action remakes has finally sputtered to a stop. Who could have guessed that recycling the same stories over and over might actually get old? According to studio reps, speaking in hushed tones like it's a national secret, the Mouse Empire is calling it quits on their grand strategy of slapping CGI onto nostalgia and calling it cinema. This revelation comes after the totally unforeseeable backlash surrounding the upcoming Snow White remake. Because who doesn't love a beloved classic turned into a soulless brand extension? With the plug pulled on all those innovative reimaginings, fans are now split. Some are mourning the death of live-action Bambi, while others are wondering if Disney might, heaven forbid, try making something new. But let's not get too optimistic. Nothing screams cinematic triumph like a billion-dollar box office haul paired with critics barely stifling yawns or openly cringing. Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King may have raked in mountains of cash, but let's not pretend they were winning Oscars for originality. Enter Snow White, the crown jewel of chaos. From the get-go, this masterpiece in the making was clearly suffering from a delightful tug-of-war between competing creative visions. Because what's a fairy tale without a behind-the-scenes meltdown? Test screenings, which totally never leak unless disaster is imminent, painted a glorious mess. A film that managed to alienate both purists who like their fairy tales intact and modern audiences looking for, well, anything coherent. The backlash snowballed so dramatically that Disney executives, in a rare moment of lucidity, realized continuing down this path might not just tank one film, but risk turning the entire brand into a punchline. Rachel Zegler, the unsuspecting lightning rod in Disney's latest storm of storytelling genius. Cast as the iconic princess, she boldly stepped into the role and promptly walked straight into a cultural buzzsaw. In an era where a raised eyebrow in a press interview can spark global outrage, her impassioned defense of the film's updated themes was met with all the grace and subtlety of a digital mob wielding pitchforks. Traditionalists, how dare they, were apparently scandalized that the new Snow White didn't quite radiate the same wide-eyed innocence as the 1937 original. And then came the pièce de résistance. A rumor, because of course there had to be one, that Zegler had some kind of meltdown at a press junket, allegedly requiring security to step in. True or not, the internet, forever starved for outrage, treated it like gospel. Hashtags demanding boycotts exploded across the globe, while any attempts at damage control by Disney or Zegler's reps were swept away like a tweet in a hurricane. But let's not pretend the film's woes began with the PR circus. Long before Rachel Zegler became the face of everything wrong with fairytale feminism, things behind the scenes were already spiraling into beautiful chaos. Crew members, safely cloaked in online anonymity, painted a picture of a production that was less creative process and more cinematic demolition derby. Rewrites were flying, reshoots were being crammed in like overdue homework, and nobody could seem to agree on whether this was a fairy tale or a TED Talk. One technician allegedly summed it up best: "We were stitching together two completely different movies and hoping the seams wouldn't show." Test audiences with their infuriatingly functional eyesight spotted those seams immediately. What they got was a tonal roller coaster, pratfalls and punchlines sandwiched between very serious messages about empowerment, making the whole thing feel like it was assembled in a storytelling blender set to chaos. Ah yes, because nothing says we're totally in control, like leak after glorious leak turning a multi-million-dollar film into a live-action blooper reel. When rough, half-baked footage of Snow White surfaced online, complete with bargain bin visual effects and dialogue that sounded like it was ripped straight from a motivational Instagram post, it was exactly the kind of cinematic preview Disney didn't ask for. Naturally, viewers responded with all the subtlety of a torch-wielding mob. The green screens looked cheaper than a high school theater backdrop, the digital creatures had all the charm of malfunctioning video game NPCs, and the dialogue, let's just say once upon a time, got replaced with "Live your truth, girl." Suddenly, the once mighty Disney marketing machine was no longer rolling out the red carpet. It was in full-blown PR triage mode, desperately trying to convince people they simply misunderstood the brilliance of those leaked clips. Fans, of course, responded with a polite, "We saw what we saw." Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the House of Mouse was reportedly in panic mode. Executives huddled like generals planning a retreat, one allegedly going full apocalyptic and comparing Snow White to Cats. Yes, that Cats, the musical-to-meme pipeline disaster nobody asked for. Another exec clung to hope, insisting that maybe, just maybe, the finished version would change minds once people saw it in its full polished glory. But then came the real mood killer, the financial analysts. According to the numbers, unless the public did a complete 180, the film was on track to be less magical blockbuster and more expensive cautionary tale. And while one flop could be swept under the enchanted rug, a trend of high-profile disasters, that would start eating away at Disney's real magic. Merch sales and park profits, both built on the illusion that the brand can do no wrong. Each new leak was like a gift that just kept on giving, if you were rooting for the film's downfall, that is. When rough, unfinished footage started making the rounds online, complete with bargain bin green screen backdrops and creatures that looked like they'd wandered in from a PS2 game, it sparked a fresh surge of outrage. And the audio? Pure gold. Placeholder lines that sounded less like a fairy tale and more like a TikTok influencer's daily affirmations. Viewers didn't exactly respond with awe and wonder. They pounced, accusing the film of cheap production values, tonal whiplash, and a script seemingly written by committee during a corporate rebranding workshop. Disney's well-oiled marketing machine, normally impervious to bad vibes, suddenly found itself lurching from crisis to crisis across every platform. Official statements painted the chaos as a misunderstanding, the result of selectively edited clips, because clearly audiences were just too dim to appreciate the nuance of a half-rendered CGI deer. Unfortunately for the studio, fans weren't buying the spin. To them, the clips confirmed exactly what they'd feared, that Snow White had drifted so far from its original charm, it might as well have been an entirely different movie in a princess costume. Back at Disney HQ, the vibe was less dream factory and more boardroom meltdown. Executives convened in what might as well have been emergency therapy sessions. One higher-up reportedly declared that Snow White was shaping up to be the company's very own Cats, a bloated, baffling spectacle destined to live on in internet infamy. Another tried to play the optimist card, insisting this could just be a hiccup and that early backlash might magically dissolve once the final cut premiered. But then the real buzzkill arrived: financial projections. Analysts warned that if public sentiment didn't miraculously reverse course, the film would struggle to even break even, especially with marketing costs skyrocketing in a desperate attempt to save face. One bomb might be survivable. A pattern that could crack the very foundation of Disney's brand empire, where flawless perception fuels everything from lunchboxes to roller coasters. Enter Bob Iger, stepping in like a calm CEO about to cancel your childhood. Known for his steely pragmatism and allergy to sentiment, he made the call, "Shut it all down." In a new directive, distributed like a royal decree to every department head, Iger invoked the holy grail of executive jargon, strategic realignment, and proactive brand stewardship. Translation: this is a mess, and we're trying to make it look intentional. For those on the inside, brand stewardship might as well have been code for clean it up before the shareholders notice. And so, the axe fell. Pre-production on all live-action reimaginings, frozen. Post-production teams put on indefinite hold. Artists who had spent months lovingly crafting sets and costumes worthy of a Broadway stage, they found out their work had been sacrificed to the vault via a memo that probably started with "Dear Team." And just to add a cherry on top, social media lit up like a wildfire. Because if there's one thing the internet loves more than a Disney remake, it's watching one implode in real time.